I'm really excited in a nerd kind of way about today's episode because I've been reading a ton of research on a part of the brain that is supported by a lot of relatively new and recent research and studies around this part of the brain, studies that have been done in humans. And I think that's a really key distinction to make because there are lots of studies that are done on animals and so on and so forth. And your beliefs about that aside, when we have studies that support really fascinating and powerful, shown to be true in humans, that's when I get really excited. And so this is so very interesting to me because it has major implications on how we succeed in life, but even more specifically today with you, I'm going to talk about it has implications on how we succeed at this weight loss journey and these health goals. In our 12-week metabolic program, we work with women on making physical change, no doubt. They have weight loss goals. They want to hit other kinds of physical strength goals, physique goals, right? But as an educator, I'm a firm believer in the connection among the brain, the mind, the body, and its vital importance and impact on success on this journey and success in life in general, right? So I want to share a little bit about this new brain research and why I think it matters so much. So bear with me. I'm going to talk a little bit of nerdy stuff here, but I'm going to talk really practical too. And I just think it's really cool to share this knowledge with you. So the part of the brain that I'm talking about is called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. Not that the name actually matters, but it's probably a name that you've not heard of. You know, we've heard of different parts of the brain, and sometimes when you hear those, you're like, oh, okay, I know about the prefrontal cortex, yada, yada. But this is probably a part of the brain that you've never even heard the name of before. And that's really the only reason the name matters, is to distinguish that. Here's what really does matter about that and what the data about this part of the brain is showing. And that is when we do something, when humans do something that they do not want to do, that specific area of the brain gets bigger. It grows. When you do anything that you don't want to do, for example, you exercise and you don't enjoy it, you begin to change the way that you're eating and you're incorporating new and healthy ways of doing that. And you're not really just thrilled about giving up, your fast food or treats, sugar, whatever, right? And it's super important for me to make that distinction as I'm trying to get the words out of my mouth, because this, like, I don't want to component is key. Okay. The growth only happens in this part of the brain when there is that I don't want to component, when you resist wanting to do it, when you don't like the change, when it's uncomfortable, when there is a friction that exists. So to put it plainly, it grows when you have to do something that you say, I don't want to do this. I don't like doing this. I don't enjoy doing this. That part has to be present for this area of the brain to increase in size. Now, here's what we know about this part of the brain and why size matters. We've heard all of our lives, size doesn't matter, but in this case, it does, right? This area of the brain is bigger, physically larger in athletes. It's also especially larger, and it grows even bigger in people who see themselves as being challenged and who are overcoming that challenge, through going through the process of overcoming that challenge. Okay. And it's larger and it keeps its size in people who live an extremely long time. Now, I learned some of this and some really interesting stuff from the Huberman lab, Dr. Huberman, if you're relatively familiar with that neuroscientist. And if you're not, just kind of giving credit where credit is due for some of the research that I've done. Scientists are beginning to recognize, and this is part of what I learned specifically from him, scientists are beginning to recognize and credit this part of the brain as being like the core component of willpower. And women will talk to me all the time about how they don't have any willpower. And I've kind of sloughed that off as like willpower is not like it's not necessary. You don't, it's not about willpower. And it's not. I still hold those beliefs. But if there is such a thing as willpower that needs to be present, or whatever that component is, scientists are realizing that this part of the brain and the size of this part of the brain is a core component of that ability to have willpower to do things. But even more interesting, I learned that scientists are beginning to believe that this part of the brain and the size of it is actually the seat of our will to live. Wow. Like that blows my mind. Okay. The impact of that is amazing because I find this research and these findings as so potentially powerful in treatments for people, for example, who have been severely depressed or even, to the extent of being suicidal, with PTSD, with other issues that veterans, former military officers deal with in coming back from war, in other mental illness treatments and the implications for those. I find this is extremely potentially powerful for those things. And I'll be interested to see kind of what direction that goes. But for the work that I do with women who are in this transitional phase of life, who have physical health goals, weight loss goals, who want to work on changing their mindset and understand the power of the energetics and the power of mindset and the role that it plays in not only reaching physical goals, but succeeding in life in lots of different ways. And as it relates to us living our best lives, I find this research about this part of the brain extremely powerful as it can most definitely impact how we approach those goals. And again, especially I think as we as women approach this mid stage of life with all of the transitions that we're experiencing. And so maybe you're sitting there thinking like, okay, why, Lori? Like, what's the big deal with this? We know that we already have a lot of information and knowledge around the different parts of the brain and how it impacts and controls fear and how the implications that that has on our everyday life and decisions that we make, change and how we are kind of wired for comfort, those kinds of things. But it's more than that because of the specific connections they've found between this part of the brain and obesity in particular. So they've found that this part of the brain is larger in athletes, right? But it's also distinctly and definitely smaller in obese people. And I think this is so vitally important and like, wow, like mind blowing. Because here's the thing, it's smaller in obese people, but it does grow in obese people when they work on exercise, when they work on nutrition, when they work on making change in those ways. So it's really important that we note some conclusions that can be made from the research that's being done and the impact that that can have on how we approach our weight and our health journeys. Okay. And personally, I'm excited because this all reinforces our approach to helping women, the approach we take at Lori Dottie Lifestyle, and specifically the approach and the way I've put together our 12-week metabolic resuscitation program. Okay. So for example, if you begin a quest to change your lifestyle, we talk about that all the time. Women will come to me and they'll tell me like, I know that this needs to be a lifestyle change. We get that, right? And that's great. You begin to work on changing daily habits. You want to make better habits become kind of more second nature to you. You want it to be disciplined. You want it to be part of your routine. We know that in the beginning, that's harder, right? It feels more difficult. Sometimes women will say it feels just so overwhelming to make those change and or to make those changes. And what we all seem to be striving for is that we want that hard to get easy. We want to get to a place where we work through the hard part so it becomes our quote unquote lifestyle. And the implication there is that I don't have to think about it. It's easy for me. And I tell women all the time when they start our 12-week program, things feel harder. That's to be expected, especially in the beginning. Learning the components of like what we teach as it relates to nutrition and exercise and the mindset parts that we work on, that I tell them it's going to feel harder in the beginning. But I also tell them, and I'm honest about this, we don't want anything on this journey to be so easy that you never think about it. I know that can sound counterintuitive. You're like, well, hell, I don't want to live a hard life. I want it to get easier. And to some extent, I do want things to start to feel second nature to women who we work with. That's important to you sustaining results, right? I say all the time, though, I'm not a weight loss coach. I'm an identity coach. I'm about helping you make a transformation at the level of who you are. And in some ways, that means that when it becomes second nature, it feels like it's going to be a little bit easier, and that's fine. But I will continue to scream from the rooftops that your transformation must include this continuous desire and commitment to wanting to continuously learn, to continuously push, to continuously challenge yourself in ways that feel a little uncomfortable. I have always had this innate belief that when you're challenged, when you're uncomfortable, you are growing. Well, now I have freaking proof that it is absolutely scientific and absolutely necessary. Okay, so hang with me for a minute here. So for example, when I trained for a full marathon, I did not enjoy it. I'm going to tell you, I will always say that I admire people who can just go out and run 10 and 15 and 18 miles and they just love it. And I came to enjoy running, don't get me wrong, but I never freaking fell in love with training for a marathon. And in fact, that freaking race, I've only run one full marathon, and I'm totally glad that I did it. And this example is part of why I'm telling you that. But the race itself even was freaking grueling. It was painful. It was an excruciating physical and mental challenge. But when it was complete, I didn't train for anything that was that hard and that miserable again. And guess what? I wasn't in as good of shape either. I didn't have that deep desire that I had while I was training and doing that grueling, miserable running for the marathon. And now I have scientific evidence to back up why. I completely understand why. When my exercise and fitness routine is easy and I enjoy it, I do not have the same growth. I don't feel the same willpower. I don't feel the same zest, if you will. So that's what's got to stay part of our lives. If we want to keep that zest, that drive, that willpower, you've got to also keep a little bit of the I don't want to, I hate it part. And some people may hear this and think that it sounds masochistic, but I say that's what not only keeps us and our physical goals, like us able to sustain those physical goals, but it also, it keeps us alive. And that's what this research proves. And that's why a few years back, I created Next Level Coaching, The 12-week MRS program is not the only thing that women have available when you come to work with us. That's not like the end of the road. We have next level coaching available for women who it's right for and who we invite to it and who want to keep that zest. It's the next step in keeping the challenge part of your life's journey. It's keeping the coaching that helps you to get in a little bit of that I don't want to and keep it there in your life. That's how you truly sustain your physical and your mental health. I believe that in my heart of hearts. I always have. And now I've got freaking scientific neuroscience data and research to back it up. Look, life is not supposed to be easy. I say that all the time. And perhaps it truly is part of God's plan that we always strive, that we always stay challenged. Maybe that's how we keep our center core of that will to stay alive so strong and so long into our lives, right? People have been searching forever for like, what's the magic bullet for people who live beyond 100? Well, I think we're finding part of that secret. I tell our clients all the time, life is made up of highs and lows. In fact, I have them stay aware of that. And I have them even write about it at different parts in our 12-week program and in next level coaching, because I want you to stay in touch with that feeling, the feeling of both the highs and the lows. Because if you think about it, without the struggle of the lows, we really can't truly celebrate and be grateful for those highs, right? You've got to have a little bit that you've got to have that comparison. You've got to have that compare and contrast to appreciate the highs. If everything is rainbows and roses all the time, they're not big rainbows. They're not big roses, if that makes sense. And so I know this was a little bit of a nerdy chat in today's episode, but I really believe this is something to ponder and to think even really more deeply about what you want and need in your life, not to only reach those goals to maintain your physique, if that's what you're after, but also to keep on living, as Matthew McConaughey would say, right? But I would take it a step farther and I would say to keep on living our best lives, we've got to have that component. We've got to keep that zest alive through that challenge. So again, I know it was a little nerdy, but I think it's super fascinating and I cannot wait to see what happens in the world of weight loss and therapy and treatment for mental illness for our health journeys and our quest to live longer, more productive, full of joy lives. So hope this was helpful. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I've got some resources that I'm happy to share with you on this topic. If you're interested, shoot me a message. And as always, thanks for being here with me.